Good afternoon, evening, morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us at our session today. I am joining you from the road on the M6 to Glasgow this morning, and thanks to everyone. And it's quite a rainy day in Scotland today. So as you know, with our webinars on IM Tech, guys, please feel free to say hello to everyone and tell us where you are and how the weather is. Um, as I mentioned, we are very lucky today to have, and we're quite honored to have um, two Microsoft engineering guys to introduce the communications compliance to the IM Tech group. And to be quite honest, it's very handy to know these guys, even if you just connect with them on social media. They're both with Microsoft Engineering, and I would let them introduce themselves more so that you can get to know them much better. So, what we're going to do today, guys, is if you have any questions, put them on the chat, put them on the questions tab, and we will be monitoring them so we could ask. And if you've got the capability to just say what the question is, please feel free to just speak out as well on our session. So uh, I'll hand over to Christophe first. Thank you, Christophe.
Actually, let me make sure this is good. Everyone, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Thanks, Patrick. So actually, I'm going to hand it to Patrick because it's really Patrick who's going to kick it off, and then I'll talk. So off to you, Patrick.
Thanks, Christophe. So welcome, everyone. We're excited to be here today. Talk to you about Microsoft Communication Compliance. I'm Patrick David. I'm a program manager on our customer acceleration team at Microsoft. Part of my role is helping customers implement Microsoft compliance solutions, such as communication compliance, which we're going to be talking about today. And Christophe, who you just met, is also here with me today. Christophe, you want to introduce yourself real quickly now?
Sure. Thanks, Patrick. So my name is Christophe Fiessinger. Definitely a pleasure to give a presentation to fellow European. I might not sound like it, but I am from Europe, from France in particular. As Patrick mentioned, we're both on the Microsoft 365 security and compliance team, which basically has two big scope, compliance and security, and specifically both of us focus on the compliance side. And the topic du jour, which is communication compliance, is also something that I focus on day to day. So if you don't know what a program manager role is at Microsoft, we interact with communities such as yours, with customers, partners, the whole ecosystems of people using Microsoft products, and then we translate that into typically product specifications and product ask, and then we work internally with our developers to make those asks a reality. So that's our day-to-day job in a nutshell, and definitely a pleasure to be there today, and hope that it's going to be a lively discussion. That's what we're here for, so don't hold back. I know Europeans tend to be blunt, so do it.
Awesome. And I think I forgot to mention where I am. So I am also based in the US. I'm actually out of Ohio. So I'm on the East Coast while Christophe's on the West Coast in Redmond. So great to be here, as Christophe said. So as we know, the shift to hybrid work has deepened our focus on workplace communication. And we know no matter what industry you're in, whether it be financial services, government, retail organization, or even a school district, monitoring communication can be important. Sometimes this is even required by regulatory obligations. Other times you just want to make sure your employees are following maybe a code of conduct or helping to maintain a safe working environment. And so as you'll see, communication compliance can help you quickly detect and act on a range of compliance issues, including FINRA regulations, as I mentioned, code of conduct, or threats in the workplace, all while protecting end user privacy. So let's talk a little bit about this and how communication compliance can help you meet these needs. We've got 4 pre-configured policy templates that give you the ability to create your own policies to monitor violations across Teams, Exchange, online, and even non-Microsoft content such as like Bloomberg Messenger, Slack, Zoom, just to name a few solutions that we can protect and monitor communications against. So whether you're using our machine learning capabilities, image detection, or bringing your own keyword or lexicons, we give you these capabilities out of the box to quickly get started building policies and detecting violations. Once an alert's triggered, a team of investigators can go in, take remediation actions such as notifying a user, removing a message from Teams, or maybe we want to kick off a workflow using our Power Automate integration. If the violation requires it, we can even have an investigator elevate this to an e-discovery case for further legal review and deeper analysis. We do this while knowing it's important for organizations to maintain end user privacy, which is why we allow for pseudo-anonymization in the product. We also offer RBAC capabilities so admins can configure who is accessing the solution. Reviewers are only able to see the policies they've been explicitly added to. And we do this all in a way that actions are audited and can be tracked. So let's look at how this all works. As I discussed before, communication compliance is part of the insider risk solution. It helps maintain communication risk by helping you detect, capture, and act on inappropriate messages inside the organization. So to do this, we start by creating a communication policy to look at a group of users or individuals' communications that match a predetermined set of conditions. And these conditions can be one of the more than 200 out-of-the-box sensitive information types we have, such as like credit cards, social security numbers, driver's license, or this can be a custom keyword dictionary that you brought. So maybe you've got a list of terms that you want to look for, or maybe you want to build a reg expression to look for matches. We also have out-of-the-box machine learning classifiers, such as harassment, discrimination, profanity, threat, and we have image detection such as adult, gory, or racy images that we can look for. We also have the ability to look for conditions such as messages between individuals, and we can control how many of those messages we want to look for, or we can do this while looking at OCR capabilities. So we have optical character recognition capabilities built into the product so we can actually capture text on images. So when building a policy, you choose from a combination of these or one of these options. So you can easily build a policy that meets your business needs. So then let's look at how we monitor and what we monitor for. So we have the ability out of the box to start monitoring communications in Microsoft 365, whether that be Exchange Online, Teams, Yammer Native, or Skype for Business, without any additional configurations or setup needed. Oops. We also have the ability to monitor for additional non-Microsoft solutions with our data connectors. And we have a number of different mediums that we can monitor for. As I mentioned before, Bloomberg Messenger, Zoom, Slack, SMS messages. So in order to do this, you need to set up a either Microsoft native connection or a partner connector. So now we're monitoring and we've had matches, we can take action on these. So investigator goes in and they need to take actions on the messages that have been captured. And they can do this simply by reminding the user maybe that this is against the code of conduct policy, right? So just a reminder that they need to abide by code of conduct. Maybe it's a training opportunity. Maybe it's delete the message from Teams or create an automated process using our Power Automate integration. And sometimes this case might be something that's maybe more severe and it needs a deeper review. They can elevate that case, take all the messages that were captured and elevate that to an advanced e-discovery case where a legal team can get in there and look at the look at the problem and see if a further action maybe needs to be taken. And we do this all while being tracked and monitored and audited. So you can meet your regulation obligations. We know who's taking what actions and how they're being taken. And then we also are able to pull this into Sentinel or another SIM solution for additional investigation or building it into your processes you maybe have today, if that's what you use. So with that, that's kind of a high-level overview. I'll turn it over to Christophe, who will actually show this as a live demo on how this all works. Christophe?
Okay. So thank you, Patrick. I know some of you were asking about making things bigger. I think as I'm learning this new platform, you can go full screen or collapse the chat, which will help. Also, we'll share the slides. So I know some of those fonts were pretty small, but you'll get those afterwards. So here I'll start. Here I'm sharing my screen. I'm going to make things bigger for that point, but let me just start the introduction a little bit. So basically, enough slides. You'll see actually we don't have that many slides in our deck. It's more about Q&A and giving you live product demos. So basically, I'll be doing basically 2 demos. The first one, I'll show you how you can configure such policy to monitor for risky communications. And secondly, I'll show you what can you do once you detect some of those patterns. How can you investigate and, more importantly, remediate those communications? So I don't know how many of you are familiar with Microsoft 365 Compliance Center, but this is just a glimpse of it. Again, there's a lot of solutions in our stack to help you with things like record management, e-discovery, data loss prevention, yada, yada, yada. And you can see some of those flavors here on the left-hand side, and we got a lot more. You can see here we have a lot of solutions that are available. But again, the topic du jour is communication compliance. So I'm just going to collapse this to optimize for real estate, and I'm going to make things maybe a tad bigger. So again, it's wherever you are, small screen, or if you're on your phone, you can see, you can follow along of what I'm talking about. So with that introduction, again, so let me show you how you can configure policies to, again, connect back to what Patrick was mentioning, depending on the type of alerts you want to get. So we do have a set of templates you can see here on the left-hand side. And for instance, one of the templates is monitor for offensive language. So I can easily click on that. I can change the name if I wanted to. I can assign myself, and then I could create that policy. But let me show you, since we got a little bit of time, I click on this wizard, and then you'll see, instead of being the short versions to create things in a couple of clicks here, I'll show you the step-by-step just to walk you through the different options that you get. So give it a name, give it a description. In this screen, it's all about who is your target audience. So for instance, I think I've noticed in the attendees, some people who are from academia, for instance. So we do have a lot of customers, public school districts, and the way it works is, if you're a school district, then typically you probably have multiple middle school, elementary school, or high school. So one pattern you could do is, instead of looking at all the, let's say, high school students, but that might be hundreds of or thousands of students, you might say, Patrick is the head for this high school. So we'll scope it down to all the students in his high school, instead of looking at all the high schooler in the district. So that would be one way you could do that. By here, you could just then put a group of users, same thing. And you might say, I want to look at everyone in Scotland, or everyone in the UK, or I want to look at everyone only in this particular business group in research or in marketing. So you can scope users, you can even exclude users. And then here, this field is all about, and you'll see that later on when I do the second part of the demo, which is, okay, we've scoped to an audience. Then who's going to be privy to investigating and remediating those potential violations? And typically, again, this is a production demo tenant. Typically, depending on the use case, if it's code of conduct, then For things that are like that, typically it's someone from human resources. If it was a school district, it might be the principal, the counselor, whoever is apt at looking at this data capture and making a call on what to do next. If it's, let's say, to fulfill regulatory compliance, if you're a large bank, then it might be your compliance team and so forth. So that's what the reviewer field is. Moving along, as Patrick mentioned, yes, we have all the Microsoft 365 communication modality that you can think of. And in this tenant, actually, I'll show you. I didn't configure it, but yes, we also can support here. So I just switched screen. Sorry, did that pretty quickly, but you would go under data classifications, data connectors. And this is where you would pick non-Microsoft communication modalities. So you can see here there's a lengthy list of things you can pick from, such as I don't know, Salesforce or Zoom or Slack and so forth, or other professional apps that users might use. So we definitely can cater to non-Microsoft communication channels. So if I'd configure any of those connectors, then I would get more options here. So this is the what channels you want to look at. So by default, everything is selected. And then in this last screen, so I've picked the audience. I say what specific modality I want to analyze for that audience. And then this is all about, okay, what pattern am I looking for? So in this case, because I picked a template, it was automatically configured that we already picked what we call classifiers, and think of those as machine learning models that are trained to look for specific patterns in languages. So hopefully this is pretty straightforward what harassment is, what profanity is. Threat looks at both threat to another individual or threat to oneself, aka I've got depression or suicide tendencies. And then we don't just look at text, we also look at images. So if someone's sharing adult, think of porn, if racy, think nudity, and gory is pretty self-explanatory. So again, you can pick and choose. You could say maybe gory images not my top of mind, or maybe profanity, people swear a lot, so I can remove that, and I only want to look at those patterns. And again, there's more options. Right now we're working on a model to detect discrimination, so I could say I'm going to add this and so forth. So this is about picking your condition. I'll show you another policy where we're doing a different type of pattern detection. And then I'll get back to this options. So that's just one sample. I'll show you another policy that, again, I've pre-configured. So this one is about, actually, I'll show you this one, this confidential project. So here, again, we've talked about the audience, but again, what's interesting is this. So basically in here, what we're doing is we're monitoring for a specific set of keywords. As Patrick mentioned, we can monitor for keywords. We can monitor for specific numbers like a driver's license, a credit card, or some number pattern that may be specific to your organizations, to your industry, and that maybe it's confidential things, like a contract number, and you want to make sure that only the people that are that have the right permissions are using those numbers and not sharing it wildly within your organizations. So that's a policy that's, like Patrick mentioned, another common use case, which is how do we make sure that the people that, let's say, working on merger acquisitions or working on confidential things aren't sharing that data within their peers at the same company, or even worse, outside of the organization. And so, there's a lot more options. Another common use case, you can also look at, is someone sharing information to a competitor or to another organizations outside of my school district or boundary. So you can see all those options. We can analyze attachments and so forth. So lots of options. So this options, what we call optical character recognition, it's all about, this day and age, a very common form for the new generations to communicate is to share an image. And the image might be a pretty cat, whatever it is, but what matters is not so much the image, it's what's embedded in the image. And, I could create a meme or create a GIF and put the text in the image, and the text could be violations of your code of conduct. the text could contain some confidential information or some secrets that I'm trying to bypass the system by putting text in an image, and that's a way to detect that and then to run that to the above conditions to see is Christophe trying to do something that would put the company at risk. And then this last field, which I didn't talk about earlier, is again the volume of communication, because you could be monitoring thousands of users, you could be looking at lots of different channels. The volume of communication could be enormous. So potentially you can also sample how many matches you get, and that's what you would do here. You could say maybe out of all the message that match that list of confidential keywords, I only want to get 10% samples. That means if I catch 10, that means there's 90 out there or 90 messages that have the same pattern that get sent. So again, that's a way to throttle things because of the volume could be enormous. So that wraps up how you can actually. One more that I want to talk about is, let me see. So another pattern also on communication is this pattern, which is how we monitor for things like conflict of interest. And so this is another template that we have. And in this case, this is again the sample demo tenant, but basically you pick two cohort, A and B. So in this case, I get a sales team and a legal team. And again, maybe there's a good reason why you want to look at the communication between those two groups. Maybe again, it's the secret team in charge of an acquisition. We want to make sure that only those folks are talking about the secret code word for the acquisition, and they're not talking to the business or whatever because it hasn't been public. Or maybe there's conflict of interest. If you're in the government sectors or maybe advertising, sometimes you might have two accounts that are in the same industry, and those two accounts, maybe you're two soda company, you want to make sure that they don't talk to one another. So that would be one way to say, is there any conflict of interest type behavior? And so you pick those two cohort, where it's one individual each or a group of individual each. And then again, you can say, I want to look at everything, or instead of say, I only want to see communication when they mention the secret code word for the acquisition. So that's another pattern that we have today. Yeah, I'm seeing Patrick. Yeah, definitely, if you have questions, don't be shy. I think we'll have plenty of time afterward as well. And then Patrick, if you see something, since I'm not looking at the chat, please feel free to interrupt. So I'll continue on the demo. So that wraps up. Again, you can set up a policy. It only takes a few seconds, and off you go. So then I'll switch gear and say, okay, great. We're looking for patterns on how the users in my tenant communicate. What do I do next when I see some? So let's start with the confidential projects example that I was showing you here. So I'll open the policy. Again, only the folks that are being assigned a reviewer can access that policy. The goal is to be very strict on the privacy and only specific folks that have been assigned will see that. So here I've loaded this policy. I get like little widgets on how many matches do I get in the past, 21 days. And I get a little breakdown on what are the different channels and individuals that are posting things. But the fun starts when I go to this pending tab. So think of pending as kind of like a queue of all those messages I haven't triaged yet. And again, the reason we have this notion of a queue is you could have multiple, it could be Patrick and Christophe reviewing those confidential alerts, or Patrick, Christophe, and Maria. So here I can, you can see here we got emails, and because this is a demo tenant, I'm subscribed to a lot of newsletters to try to trigger those policies. So, this is a mundane Bloomberg alert, and you might say, oh, why does this get flagged? And I can go to this view, and then a little orange square on the right, and it tells you exactly why I get flagged. So I didn't tell you that, but green is one of those keywords I'm monitoring. Another one is just the Greek god. So that's why this message. And I can just say, okay, that's fine. This one is fine. I can just resolve and get it out of the queue. This one doesn't need further actions from the team. So we're all good on this one. And then I would go to the next one, and here, we get, again, this is a demo, and this is a message in Teams. So you can see a little icon here, Microsoft Teams, and I use the word, again, Zeus, which is one of that trigger word that I'm monitoring, and here I put a pretty dog picture, and the list goes on. Here's more things that got shared. We also have Yammer messages, and like I said, if I'd configured non-Microsoft connectors, that we get different modalities. Let me show you a couple things here that we're doing here on the detection. So one thing, here's another pattern that we detect. So this one is mundane email. It says, please read. It looks fine to me. It's just not much text, and it's a beautiful Word document. And again, what happens is the Word document, again, contains, oops, I went too fast. Let's go back. So the Word document contains that keyword. So again, we give you the ability to quickly narrow down to why did we pick up. And you as an investigators will then decide, is that okay to have this word in this document? Was it okay for this users to share it to Lydia? Again, this is part of the investigation that you would do. And to do that, we give you a little more context. So one thing we give you is the ability to say, hey, can I see all the back and forth between those two users, so I can get a sense of, was it just Christophe who was crossed the line, or Patrick was equally guilty, and so forth, or whoever's the recipient, and it could be plural. So here you can see there's different messages that were sent. Again, this is a demo tenant, so it kind of doesn't really make sense. And we also show you a couple messages after. The other thing we give you as part of this investigation is the ability to see, is it this user's first time he or she crossed the line, or no, is he or she a repeat offender? And that's what this tab gives you. And you can see, this user's definitely had some past violations. I've been using this demo tenant quite a bit, including things got escalated to our legal team. So clearly, in this case, it wouldn't be this person's first rodeo. So maybe I need to treat this with severity, because not the first time they've crossed the line. So that's just an example of some of those investigation you can do. Let me go and show you another policy, and to show you a little more of some of the investigation you can do before I talk about remediation actions. So let's pick another policy that I've got, and I've got this offensive language policy that, again, it's all looking about what potentially could be perceived as code of conduct violations. So here I click on this policy, and again, I got some matches. So here, I get Isaiah sending messages in Teams to Lynn, and on the face of it, I see David by Michelangelo JPEG. So that looks like, there's nothing wrong with that, an exclamation mark. When I do click and look at the image, and I apologize in advance, I will see an image of Greek art. And again, obviously naked man. That's for you to decide whether this is acceptable in this context or not. But it's just an example. In this case, it wasn't so much the text. There was no text in this message, but the image classified this as a racy image. Again, that might make you smile, and maybe that's totally okay. And racy image is not really your focus, but maybe you want to only look at, like I said, adult content, aka porn. But that shows you an example of detecting some things that might be unacceptable. Here's another example. So I get some couple messages here between Isaiah and Lynn and this other users. And again, you might say, Christophe, I don't speak that language. This is actually Japanese. And it's like, okay, that's totally fine. And so we also automatically detect that this is in another language than my preferred language that I'm currently using the solution in. So we give you a translation tab, and on the fly, we're going to translate what is Japanese in this case to English. And I should say, since we got a big British crowd or a Scottish crowd, you can English versus British and so forth. You can also go at that level. But here, it gives a translation. Again, it's not, we're using a machine translation to do that. It might sound funny, that sentence. I'm not a Japanese expert. But again, at least as you as investigator, it gives you a good glimpse of, hey, does it really sound bad, or do I need to get a native speaker to further evaluate to figure out what to do next? So again, it's a way so that you're not blocked, because that your users are very creative. Here's one from my native language. So we're again, if you don't know what this means, I'll put a little translation. I'll get the equivalent in English. But it's the goal is to give you enough to make a decision what to do next. But clearly here is a threat. The insult is one thing, but probably what's more severe about this message is the threat from one user to another, which is that's a big red flag in my organization. You're not supposed to talk to your peers like that. So that shows you examples of detecting things and more importantly, investigating things in your organizations. So like I said, I've done my homework. I've detected some things. Now comes the next question, which is, okay, let's deal with this violations. So there's a couple things you can do here in the command bar. Like I said, if it was just false positive, false alert, you can simply resolve that item. So it's okay, I reviewed it, no big deal. I can put a comment and so forth. One thing that's pretty common with customers, I could just simply say, hey, Grady, this is just not an acceptable behavior. So I can just send an email notification to Grady and remind him, in this case, that this is not in line with our company, with our organization. I'm saying company, but I know, again, some of you are in education. So it doesn't abide by my district, by my uni's code of conduct. The other thing we can do that Patrick mentioned is, if this is maybe a repeat offender, it looks like he keeps crossing the line, then harassing, in this case, Johanna, then I can also escalate that to, let's say, a supervisor or someone else on my team that will also review and make the final call what to do. So this is what this escalate, and then you can see all the other people that are on this policy, and I can say, Lynn, please review repeat offender. So whatever the point here is, we know every customer as well, their own processes at the end of the day, and how do they deal with those violations, whether it's compliance violations or code of conduct violations. And even with a code of conduct, we know that you'll probably deal differently if something is a physical threat versus someone who's depressed, or versus it's blunt discrimination versus someone sharing inappropriate images. So here I've sent a notification, and in this case, Lynn, will get an email notification saying, hey, something had been escalated to you, and she gets a link. So to save her time, instead of seeing the entire 41 messages, will click on the link, and she'll just see that one that I flagged for her to review, and then she can decide what to do next. And then a couple more I'll show you that are also popular with customers is, again, if this message is let's say it's in a team channels, and let's say I got lots of students, or it's a big community within my organization, and it's just blunt violations of my policy, where someone shared some customer data or someone was being too graphic, then I could simply remove that message. And that's what that little button is. I can just zap that message. It takes a few seconds. If I show you here in Teams, so it was a message from Maud, from the administrator to Alan. I go to Teams here, and let's wait for this to be complete. It's taking a few seconds, but basically it removes the message, and probably the next question is the message being removed, and it's probably this one that I already removed. So you see the message got removed, so no more exposing our users to this message, and voila. Now you might ask, I get that also a lot from compliance, we're just removing the message from the end users. If you have, let's say, a retention policy or legal hold on the user's communication because that user is already on the watch list, we're not removing that. So if it's a piece of evidence potentially that you'll use, you're absolutely, we don't touch that. The other thing that, because in this case is we're dealing with machine learning, and machine learning is this ever evolving game, especially with languages, of how do you improve the detection to really narrow down the needles in the haystack and not be swamped with false positive. You can also give us feedback if you think that message in Japanese, for instance, I was showing you earlier, is not worth your time. It's what we call a false positive. Then you can also send that data back to us so we can use that to as a learning data point to retrain our models. So that would be a one remediation action. And then the last thing that I'll show you is, again, if it's really severe, we know that potentially you might want to pass that to pass those messages, and it could be singular or multiple message to your legal team. And that's what this is about. So I can just, create a, case. I can create a case. I can put a note for my legal team. And the beauty here is, I've already done the hard work of calling whatever are those messages that are risky, that will put organizations at risk. So the legal team, basically what it does is creates a case with those two pieces of evidence, and then that's the starting point that they'll use to whatever the process, whether they'll use that to start a termination process or whatever it is. So that's, oh great, and I get an error. Yes, Patrick.
So we did have a question come in about what languages do we currently support for our machine learning, and are these languages fully supported via the OCR capabilities also?
Yeah, so great questions. So today we support 7 languages, and I'm gonna cheat because I always miss one, but you can see it here. It's also in our documentation. So English, French, German, Italian, Japanese, Chinese, I'm missing one. Anyway, 7 languages. And then we're actually going to announce 4 more. Arabic, so this is Chinese Simplified. We're going to do Chinese Traditional, Korean, and Dutch. So, and to be clear, this is the languages that are supported for that machine learning detections. We have plenty of customers, if your language is not covered, or more importantly, if you get a list of what we call taboo keywords, like there's just words that have no room in your organizations. And I'm sure you can think of many examples, whether it's around racism, sexual, yada, yada, yada. You can simply say, hey, here's my list of taboo words. And so you could also configure a condition that either Microsoft detects using those 4 languages, but let's say I'm Danish or Swedish, I forgot, Portuguese was the other language. Then here's my list of words that just no room in my organization. And if someone uses one of those words, I want to flag it. So it's basically, you can either do an and or an or. In this case, I'm going to do one with an or. So you do here, and then you would pick either match the above or the below, or you can do an or between those 2 conditions. So again, lengthy answer that we support 7 languages, but if there's one that's not supported and you want to look for specific taboo keywords, you can easily do that by uploading your list of taboo keyword in your language and start looking at those in addition to those 7 languages we support today.
And then we did have 2 questions come in always about the licensing for the product, right? We can't get a session, it feels, without the licensing questions. So this is a E5, A5 license. I did post in the chat too, the questions, the link to the documentation there of the support license. And then there was also a question about, does the person need E5 creating a policy or the people it applies to? This is for the people that it applies to. So anyone you're monitoring needs to have the E5 license, right?
Yeah. Yeah, thanks, Patrick. And also G5 is government. So we're in engineering, but we're not your licensing experts, but definitely, yeah, those are the requirements. I'm also pointing to the documentations. So typically the recommendation is talk to your Microsoft account manager or licensing specialist to figure out, what is the exact cost, what would it come down to in your environment. And then you have the ability to set up a trial. I think is it 30 days, Patrick, or 60 days?
I think it's still 30 days, but I think we're looking to expand that to even 90 days. But we need to check on where we are with that.
So you could set up a trial, and here's the link here where you can evaluate, is this a value to my organizations before you fully commit to buying licenses? So yeah, great questions on the licensing requirements. Last quick thing I was going to show you, and I'm glad we're going to Q&A, is again with those patterns, whatever I'm detecting, and here you see other things I'm looking for. We also give you insights because the idea is, it wouldn't be useful to find out if this entity, maybe this company I just acquired, or this specific school, there's just a lot of violations. So instead of being reactive, why don't we be proactive? And maybe we need to have a day of training and remind all those students in that high school, remind all those people that are part of this acquired company that their behavior doesn't align with our headquarters behavior. Or that, you can't talk about the secret acquisition until we've told you so, it's non-public. So this is a good way to say, okay, let's be proactive. And if I see something that I don't like, maybe let's fix it at the source versus playing a game of whack-a-mole. So we have a number of report, and you can also see, we also break down violations by channels. And believe it or not, like Patrick was mentioning, especially with the pandemic and the hybrid workforce, a lot of people that typically maybe might have adopted some of those new tools to communicate because they would go in the office and have meetings face-to-face, like back in the old days, and talk face-to-face and resolve things face-to-face. Now relying on digital tools such as Teams, and sometimes people are extra stressed and maybe step out of bound in Teams. So it's interesting to see that lots of violations are being driven by just people just giving those tools to users and maybe not reminding them of how you're supposed to do those tools, or the users forgetting, or the end users being stressed. But it's interesting to see, so here you could break it down, like if at third party, how many of those channels are triggering some of those policies. And the point I'm getting at is kind of like back to what I was saying. Maybe if you're seeing a lot of violations in Teams, again, maybe I need to have a little training with my all the users in my organization and say, hey, Team is just yet another tool, but it's a corporate tool. This is not your Snapchat, your TikTok, your whatever. Again, nothing wrong. Again, all those social media, but this is a tool for work, and hence by nature, there's some guardrails, and you can't just be too creative, and you've got to temper your passions and your emotions, because things might not be acceptable in professional settings. Obviously, if it's personal on social media, then it's the Wild West. So this is a set of reports that we have. And actually, that's all I had with respect to demonstration. And it looks like we get tons of time. So I don't know if, Patrick, you want to go back to some of those slides, and maybe that'll spark more questions.
Yep, I'll jump into the slides here. There was one question that came in. So what workloads does communication compliance currently run across? And are there any workloads it doesn't support? Sway, whiteboards, Stream support would be especially interesting. So today out of the box, right? Teams, Exchange Online, Yammer, Skype for Business, and then we have those non-Microsoft products. But as Christophe's showing here, that's what we have, the M365 locations. Christophe?
Yeah, but to Patrick's point, whoever the person that asked, great questions, and we're obviously, we didn't mean this to be a kind of a roadmap discussion, but we definitely realize that how you communicate keeps evolving, whether it's with things that we give you natively in Microsoft 365 or on the ad side. So just because you're seeing here and the list on screen, we're not standing still. I'll give you an example. A top ask from customers is, this meeting, I forgot if it's recorded or not, but how about if Christophe verbally insults Patrick or verbally shares, talks about the Zeus acquisition to Patrick, who, guess what, is not tented and is not meant to hear this acquisition. So think of voice is definitely a new frontier that we want to go after. And back to the sway, the boards and things like that, we also want to look at that. So actually one pattern that I didn't show you that's on a roadmap is if I share a document in Teams, typically when you share a document in Teams, it just, if I say share from my OneDrive, it only puts the link to the document, and I can say, Patrick, look at this European expansion plan, or in this case, Patty. So again, please review is nothing bad, but maybe that document, again, contains confidential information. So that's a pattern that we're going to be, that's on our roadmap that we're going to be launching later this year, which is the ability to look at not a physical attachment like you would send through email, but something shared in Teams. And so again, that a document could have contained confidential information. Student could have used that document to insult another students and think they can fly under the radar. So yeah, definitely like the questions. Again, the list of things are supported or listed here, but we're not standing still, and we plan to add more modalities as habits and new solutions pop up.
Awesome. So let me jump back to the slides. We've got a couple more slides, and as Christophe said, we've got plenty of time here for Q&A. So keep the questions coming for sure. So just want to start here. We've got a customer story, and this is a public-facing customer story, but we worked recently with TD Bank, which is headquartered in Canada, and obviously being a bank, they have regulations that they need to follow. And so we really not only help them with communication compliance, but really unblock them with communication compliance to deploy teams to their organization, right? So there are about 80,000 employees that they were able to deploy Microsoft Teams to. 4,500 of those employees were TD security employees, which again need to be regulated. And the ability to roll out Teams with communication compliance integration help them successfully roll out, meet their regulatory compliance. And so here's a quote at the bottom. There's a link. So again, a great story of how we're able to help organizations stay compliant with our tools and also move to Microsoft Teams. So definitely, if you get a chance to take a look at that, please do. And I just want to share here, so communication compliance is part of a larger solution in the Microsoft stack, right? So all these kind of solutions work together to help you meet regulatory compliance or code of conduct policies. And then on the right here, I just want to show to where we are. And again, this is a year old now, but we will be updating hopefully this month, right, with the latest Gartner. But the last time they did this, we were up in that magic quadrant. So I just want to point that out. And again, be on the lookout this month as the latest updates come here for this. So. And then, as mentioned, communication compliance, again, is part of the Microsoft stack, right? So when you get this, it's not just, you're not just getting communication compliance, it's part of the Microsoft solutions. And all these solutions work together, right? So it's a solution that really works well with other products that you might have. So we've got our data loss prevention, we've got communication compliance, insider risk, and each of them have their own unique capabilities. For example, DLP is very transactional based, right? Focused on content where you want to stop some known risks from happening. That might be like sharing a secret recipe or sharing that top secret project information. So you know exactly what to look for, and you want to stop that from going outside your organization or being shared with people that shouldn't see that, right? So we have 2 tools. We've talked again about communication compliance. We also have insider risk, which focus on looking at patterns and histories of users to identify intent, right? So example of this is communication compliance. We've talked about a lot today, where someone might be harassing a coworker or sharing an inappropriate image at work. Where our insider risk solution might be someone leaving the organization and trying to take their work with them, right? Maybe inadvertently, or not knowing that the work that they work on while they're at that organization needs to stay with that organization. And so as you think about these 3 products, it's important to understand it's not an or solution. It's not, oh, I have data loss prevention, I don't need the others, or I have communication compliance, why do I need insider risk, right? It's about working with all 3 of these solutions, and how they can all work together is important. So, and I know that the text on here might be small. As Christophe said, we're going to share these slides with you, so you can take a look at them. So kind of some next steps here. We just want to leave you with some resources. Hopefully today you've got a good understanding of what communication compliance is. You've seen how quickly you can get started monitoring for communication and setting up policies, taking remediation actions. We definitely want to hear your feedback. So things like detecting voice or stream or whiteboards, right? We want to hear that. So definitely keep that feedback coming to us so we can improve the products to meet your needs. But we want to leave you with some resources here also. Again, we're going to share these slides. We've got skilling videos that are available here. We've got documentation to our official docs, Microsoft documentation for communication compliance. We've got deployment guides. So these are guides to help you quickly get started deploying the solutions, both insider risk and communication compliance. We've got our latest news at Inspire. We've got Ignite coming up next month, which we will be releasing a bunch of new announcements. So definitely be on the lookout for that. We've got our roadmap, our official roadmap, where we'll be putting out the updates. As Christophe mentioned, some of the ones, new supported languages for our machine learning models that are coming. And we've got our compliance one-stop shop. And so this is a great site, not only for communication compliance, but compliance in general, where folks on my team, the customer acceleration team, we go out here, we put links, we put documentation, we put some best practices. We've got actually a good guide for education customers out there also. So a number of resources to help you get started right away with the product. But again, keep the feedback coming. So that's all we've got for slides, demos. It's really an opportunity for you to ask questions that you might have of communication compliance or compliance in general that Christophe and I can help answer for you. So,
yeah.
I don't know.
Thanks, Patrick. I'll reiterate a verbal answer to something I put also in writing, which is, remember when I was telling you can remove a message? Again, it's just removing it from the team's view. But under the hood, like I said, if you set up a retention policy where it's a 1 year or 7 year or indefinite, we don't touch that. So you can continue if you're doing a content search, an e-discovery search. We don't touch that content. We're just hiding it so the users don't see that risky communication anymore. So I want to be very clear. We do abide by whatever retentions and mechanism that you have. So you as a let's say a compliance officer can always get back to the source. We're just hiding it from the users so it doesn't expose the company any longer at additional risk. One topic, and I see that we don't have a lot of questions, but I'll cover, and maybe we can wrap up earlier if you want. Again, this is your time to pick our brain and ask all the questions that you might have. Is I'm surprised you didn't ask about privacy. This is obviously typically top of mind from European customers. So we actually have a lot of mechanism in place, and I know Patrick mentioned some in the introduction. So like I said, you need to opt in to use the solution. Then, like I said, you can scope things. And then we have different layers of permissions to create policies or to investigate policies. And the other thing that I didn't show you, but like Patrick mentioned, we audit all the activities. So when I remove the message, for instance, or when I escalate it to someone else, or whatever some of those remediation action that I can do, all that is audited. So there is a kind of a watch the watcher mechanism. So if at any point in time, like, hey, how I dealt with this violation was maybe not appropriate or just appropriate, I just want to make sure, then when you have an audit trail, and again, you need additional permission to get to that audit trail. So it's not a free-for-all, and we want to make sure that all the privacy and boundaries that you set up and processes can easily be followed. And it's not, just like I can just look at everything in my tenant and get away with it. So as an anecdote, we're on the phone with a few Japanese, Japanese one Monday, but on Tuesday we're talking to folks from Germany, and in Germany, if you're familiar, we have workers console, and typically we're pretty strict on tools you can give to your employees and how you can use them. And one of the users was asking, how do you deal with workers console? And by the way, we have documentation on best practices to enable this, to work with your privacy team, your compliance team, yada, yada, yada. But another German jumped in and say, actually, the worker console in Germany like this type of solution, because again, the intent was how do we protect people from things like harassment, discriminations, and so forth. So it's definitely, like everything else, there's, is it half full, half empty? But we think that, we have customers in those strict or more conservative countries that are happily using communication compliance.
Yeah, so we did get one question that just came in here. So, and this is good to clarify. So violations that are pending review, has the violation already been blocked for end users, or is it only blocked after review? So, Christophe, you want to take that one, or?
Sure, yeah. So very good questions. And it gets back to a little bit of the slides that Patrick was mentioning. So one thing maybe we weren't clear is communication compliance is not meant to be proactive. So it's not going to block Christophe from sending an awful message to Patrick. For that, potentially you'd use what we call our data loss prevention, where it doesn't even leave my inbox, it doesn't leave my team's client. So communication compliance happens afterwards. So for the end users, they can keep sending those toxic messages, and they're not going to see anything change unless we start removing his or her messages. So it's not meant to block, it's passive, and it happens afterwards. So that's why on this slide, thanks Patrick, it's like we're saying, depending on what like I say, things you might want to block. Like if I go back to this examples of taboo words, again, there's just words that it doesn't matter. There's just no use case for those words to be used in your organization. Then maybe instead of just being passive and analyze those after the fact in communication compliance, maybe you want to set up a policy in data loss prevention. And if I try to send that message, very quickly it's taken down with one of those keywords. So that's what we're saying. It's not, should I pick one or the other? We're saying, no, it's an and. So you might weed out some usual suspects from Christophe sending an email, Christophe posting a message with our data loss prevention. But we also want to use CC for the more advanced pattern of let's say, abuse or things like that. So yeah, good questions. CC today is not meant to block at the source. That's why I was showing you it's passive, and you have a human that will then review and investigate. And again, the main reason for that is, as you've seen, especially when we use machine learning, which is typically the only way forward to really make sense because of the volume of communication, and just one keyword alone might lead with a lot of false positives. So you have a human, whether it's someone from human resources, that really, in addition to when we flag, will make the final call on what to do next. And like I said, in communication, if it was as easy as removing a message with one keyword, we probably wouldn't be talking to you, but it's a lot harder because not only it's just, you can't just look at one keyword, you gotta look at the context. Is it an insult because Christophe is having a bad day, or is it an insult targeted at a race, at a gender, at Patrick? And obviously, if it was just Christophe having a great day and swearing, that's okay. But Christophe constantly swearing towards another employee might not be okay. So that's the problem that machine learning is trying to solve versus just looking at keywords.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point, Christophe. Like, I just got a big win, right? I just got a big sale or something. I want to celebrate with Christophe, right? Maybe I get a little bit excited, share some text or messages that maybe get flagged as inappropriate, right? That's not bad, right? I don't necessarily want to block that maybe, but maybe having someone review that. Now, if I'm sharing like the Colonel Sanders recipe or something, right? Like that is something we want to block immediately, right? There's no reason to be sharing that outside. So yeah, that's a great one. So we actually just had another one in here. So I wonder, do you know what proportion of Microsoft customers are using communication compliance?
So, Anne, we do know, we just unfortunately can't share. But yeah, we can share the numbers. I'll give you, no, I'll hold my mouth, but it's the, yeah, and think of the scale at which we operate. But again, so for a couple of things, that solution, we just launched it in February of 2020, which for a lot of us feels like a different life because of the pandemic that came in green. So we've only been in market for 15 months. So it's compared to data loss preventions or e-discovery tool or retention tool, it's fairly new. And the second data point that we're seeing is this whole world of sure, I can give tools for my employees to work at home or wherever we want. But like everything in life, you're dealing with humans. If you have kids or nephews or niece, you're given a tool. If you're not giving guidance, they might not use it for what it was intended for. And so what we're seeing with the pandemic, with the COVID epidemic, is that a lot of people are using the tool for the wrong purpose or are stepping out of bounds. So the point I'm making at is we've seen a surge in demand as a lot of organizations realize that I gave Teams, I give Slack, I give Zoom, I give whatever tool for my to my employee to get work done, but I forgot to give them guidance. Or maybe I did give them guidance, but again, because you're dealing with humans and we're no longer in one room or one amphitheater, and maybe it's time to do a little second shot or booster shot, as we say in the COVID world, to remind them that, hey, Christophe, this is not acceptable. And what's fascinating with talking to customers, and again, I'm not going to give you numbers, but we've seen demand for this all over the world. I'll give you an example. In Japan, 2 years ago, they passed a law in that country to protect workers against what they call hierarchical harassment. So it's not a peer like Patrick and I are going at it. It's my manager or my manager's manager harassing me. And I guess it got so bad in Japan that they had to pass a law. And when you pass a law, typically in a country, that means all the employers by law need to protect their employees and need to start enforcing that. So again, Japan passed that law. So that means and I think in the first 2 years, only the large employers needs to enforce it. And then it's going to be the small businesses. But the point is, where I was going with that, so there's a need everywhere, whether it's education, whether it doesn't matter the industry, or like I say, there's countries that are trying to say, oh, those patterns are not acceptable. So definitely a need everywhere. The other thing that to wrap up on that we're seeing, and is a lot of the times we as human didn't mean to I didn't mean to insult Patrick. I just got carried away. I was stressed on my sofa in my living room. I was stressed. Is my family okay? Are they gonna get sick? I'm here in the US, they're in Europe. They can't fly to see me. Am I going to lose my job? So I'm just a lot of stress. And what I'm getting at is a lot of the time when people my trigger alert, it's not intentional. I didn't mean to be racist against Patrick or hurt whatever feelings. It was accidental. So that's what we're seeing is, humans are good at heart, and a lot of the time you just need to be reminded this is not acceptable. Yes, you also do have bad actors, and we also have stories like that. But most of the time, you can just say, Christophe, retake the training. I know you're having a bad day. Apologize to Patrick and move on. So that's what we're seeing is there's definitely some hope, and it's not so much about catching the bad actors. Is how do we help all our employees to foster that culture of safety and inclusion? And let's just tell Christophe, let's not police him, but let's tell him, how do you get better? Or if Christophe was depressed and threatening to harm himself, let's not fire Christophe. Let's help him. He's a valuable asset to our company. Let's give him counseling, take some time off, talk to some people. So it's really about, maybe we came across as this is about policing, but no, it could be, most of the time it's accidental. So how do we help our employees have a virtuous environment to work with? So lengthy answer on, we're seeing great demand for the tool, fueled by the pandemic. And just because, again, I think you don't need I'm not in the UK today, but there's always headlines of, hey, this executive's harassed someone and the company didn't do anything, so now it's in the news. So, right, or just there's a lot of behaviors in 2021 that are no longer tolerated in the corporate world that might have been buried or not made the headlines only a few years ago, but now it's not acceptable anymore. I'll pause. As you can see, I can talk a lot about this topic.
I mean,
ahead,
I think that's awesome. And I mean, yeah, Christophe, to your point, like training opportunities, right? And the nice thing you showed in the demo was the ability to go back and see, is this a pattern, right? Or did Christophe get excited one day, or is this something that needs to be addressed over time? Maybe it's the first time offense. Maybe Christophe's having a bad day. Maybe it's a training opportunity. So I think that's important, right? Where we have that ability to go back and see kind of the history over time. Is this a repeat offender? Maybe different actions need to be taken based on that pattern over time. And so that's really great that we've got that built into the product. The other thing you mentioned with training, right? So I know we've got a couple of universities on here, a couple of education customers, but we've seen customers in the education space, right? Maybe this is an opportunity for a guidance counselor, someone to intervene, right? Before a child does harm, or maybe can help intervene before some inappropriate action is taken, right? So this is a way to kind of monitor that and maybe help not only students out, but employees out, right? As Christophe said, it's important that you invest in your employees, right? You don't want to necessarily get rid of them because of one bad incident or one bad thing. Maybe it's an opportunity to remind them, hey, this is a work environment. This is a work tool that you have, and let's make sure you're following our code of conduct or following our policies for using this tool. Especially during the pandemic, I think it's easy, as we're all working remote or working from different locations. We don't have that way to, like, we used to walk into a building, right? And we take our hat off and we, in our business in mind now, now we get out of bed, we go to the next room, maybe in our pajamas still, and start working, right? And so there's not like that disconnect from our non-work life to our work life. And so having tools like this where we can monitor, remind employees, right, that this is a work environment, and train them if they need to. So I think those are great points. But yeah, we definitely have seen the demand for this product, and I think partially too the pandemic, right, giving tools like Teams, giving people those remote capabilities. So we do have customers using it, obviously. So
yeah, I got 3 kids, but I've seen a lot of examples during the pandemic when they were doing remote learning of kids, unfortunately, stepping out of bounds in teams. And I think that was a realization for a lot of school districts, the teachers. And again, just because kids are doing it, adult in enterprise do it too. And so it's just a matter of reminding kids, that's just not how you talk to one another, and blah, blah, blah. I think questions have dwindled down. Is it happy hour yet in Scotland? In the UK? 5 p.m. sound actually 4 p.m. That sounds like happy hour.
So one just came in, Christophe. Are there any sectors who are more exclusively adopting communication compliance so far?
So that I'll share. And again, it's not a judgment of why those sectors. So financial services is definitely one, as Patrick mentioned, non-negotiable. If I'm giving my broker dealers a tool so they can work from home or continue to do their work from home since they cannot come in the office, then by law, the regulator in the UK, the regulator in Canada, US, blah, 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 I need to monitor it as communications. So financial services definitely is one. After that, it's been, we've seen it been surprising. So one has been healthcare. Again, you can say there's a lot of sensitive informations in healthcare with the pandemic, get even more stress or more demand for that industry. Let it be a hospital or healthcare providers, whatever it is. We've seen huge demand in education, and again, educations and across the world, education spans from both K1 to 12 to higher educations, and I think the obvious use case for education is being a code of conduct. So, like I said, for everyone overnight, that remote learning wasn't even a possibility, and suddenly everyone did it. And with that, there's been a lot of hiccups and a lot of things that school districts had to look for. After that, we see also at least in the US, like I said, in different regions in Europe, it's slightly different, but a lot of utility industries, a lot of government customers. I think government customers by nature also, and what I mean by government could be a municipality or public sectors, but by nature of being government or such entities is you have higher responsibilities to your taxpayers, to your voters on how you should behave versus maybe a private industry that's maybe non-traded, privately owned, might maybe postpone dealing with the dirty laundry, whereas municipality you should abide by your standards, and because otherwise you're not going to get reelected or the funding might get cut. So and then geography, like I say, we've seen demand all over the world. That's the good questions on the sectors. But that's a question back to you. I'm sure, like we've seen quickly in the list, you come from all walk of life or all different sectors. Could you think of a case study, or could you think of no case study where this might be applicable or not deliver value?
Yeah. So we also got another one in here, devil's advocate, right? A little bit. But have you seen any increase in shadow IT when users realize communication compliance is being used? So.
Yeah. So no, this is a good question. We haven't. Again, what we've seen is there's organizations where they explicitly tell employees, we're going to use those tools, but we're also going to analyze what you say on those tools. Kind of like, hey, here's a work PC or here's a work phone. And because we're giving you this new iPhone or Android phone, we have the rights to monitor what's on that phone. And if I want to keep my personal life, I might have a second phone. So I think people realize that. Again, you could say shadow IT, but like I say, we do also non-Microsoft channels. So if you're going to go at it on Zoom and others, sure. One thing that brings up is, again, we're not meant to be an exhaustive way to monitor for, let's say, harassment. If I want to go and tell Patrick what I think of him, I could just, ideally we need to be in the office, but I can just put him in the cafeteria or in the cafe and unload on him, and you wouldn't catch that. This is not meant to be an exhausting, and how humans will always be creative if really want to be mean or do bad things. Like I say, most of this is to help people do those accidental risky communications. The bad actors, if they're really bad and with nasty intent, to your point, whoever asked that question, they're already on Signals or some third-party app, and they're already colluding and using that, flying under the radar. So we're not meant to be a a total safety net. This is just to reduce your risk. There is still risk out there, and you're absolutely right. Every day there's a new way to communicate using social media, whatever. And if I use that to insult or share secrets, we're not going to detect that. So it's like everything in life. You get a tolerance for risk. What can you mitigate easily? And there's always going to be remaining risk, aka shadow IT or other app I could use to mean harm to the company. So yeah, no, great questions. I haven't seen causations on this, but yeah, we're not meant to be 100% foolproof on all the ways humans can abuse one another.
Yeah, the other thing I'll say too is that we're talking with customers that are looking to adopt this, right? It's making sure we get the right folks in the room, right? This is just an IT decision, right? To start monitoring employees' communication, right? We usually are getting the HR team, the legal teams involved, making sure that this meets their needs, that they're allowed to do this, that there's legal in play, right? That knows what we're monitoring for, how we're monitoring, who's actually reviewing that. It's not like, hey, I want to review Christophe's communication as the IT admin, right? And I just set up a policy and I start monitoring Christophe, right? You can't control, as we mentioned a number of times, who has access to this. So it's not, by default, we didn't even talk about this, but even a global admin doesn't have access to communication compliance, right? They have to explicitly be given access or permissions to that tool and then create policies and then set up the reviewers, right? So there's a number of steps that you have to go through, and you can even give this out. We've seen organizations do this where it's not the IT folks in here monitoring policies. Yes, maybe the IT folks go in there, they're creating the policies, but they're setting up the reviewers, they're giving permissions to an HR team or someone to go in there and monitor, to be the investigators in this. So I think it's important, like as you're rolling this out, making sure you have all the right parties involved when rolling this out, and making sure you're upfront with your employees, right? If I'm given that phone, right, I know if it's a work phone, right, there's the possibility that it could be monitored, right? When I enroll my device in Microsoft, right, I agree to a policy of enrolling that device, and part of that is my communication. What I do on that device can be monitored by my organization. So I think being upfront with your customer, with your employees, is important here, and making sure we have all the right folks involved before we turn this on is important too. The last thing you want to do is have an employee realize that, like, hey, my communication is being monitored, without letting them know that was being done. So
yeah,
it's important.
But no, I think about more, because I just, on that, back to that shadow IT, is, again, you don't have to teach kids these days how to communicate with one another. And when at least my kids, when I say, okay, you're gonna go to Zoom or Teams to take your classes, they're already at plethora of ways to talk to one another. So we didn't teach them anything. But from a school district or from an organization, we're gonna say, hey, Teams is your go-to thing to chat. And by me giving you this tool, I'm liable, so I need to make sure this tool has some boundaries. And that's the only thing I can control. I cannot control anything that's, like we say, shadow IT, that hasn't been sanctioned. So, at least I can control what I'm giving my users to take a class or to work on a project. What happens outside, unfortunately, in 2021, shadow IT, I mean, it's been around for a while. Are you making it worse? I don't know. If no one's using Teams, then maybe it has nothing to do with CC. Is you need to teach people, or maybe you can give them a mobile version. But I think there's a bigger debate there, especially with the pandemic. What are the tools I'm telling people to use when the school is closed or the office is closed? And are they readily adopted?
So we just got another one. Does communication compliance apply to external guests?
So it applies to, it depends on the communication. So if a guest communicating to one of your users, yes. But if a guest we don't go out and look at, let me step back. The way this works under the hood is you need to look at a user's communication, and all those are stored in a mailbox, for lack of a better word. So typically guests don't have a mailbox. So you cannot analyze a guest. You can only say, if a guest insult Patrick and that message lands in Patrick's inbox, that we will catch. But if a guest talking to a guest, no. So we also, that's documented. And again, there's definitely some fine line on privacy as well on that topic, and that's why we don't go outside of what we control. This is really meant to be your employees or students in your districts, and only in that's the boundary, not outside.
Awesome. I think that's all the questions we had that have come in. So
we're giving 10 minutes back to everyone.
Unless anyone last minute questions they want to get in.
You got our contact information as well, so I know we talked a lot.
Yeah, and we will share this deck. I know there was, again, sorry for the small text on the screen, but we will share this deck with you, with everyone here, so you can have that, review it at your own leisure. So,
and to add to that, Patrick, I think the session itself is recorded automatically, so everybody who has signed up will get a recording of the whole session.
Oh boy, need to censor it. No, I think thank you for everyone's great questions and attendance, and have a wonderful Thursday evening wherever you are in Scotland, UK, and elsewhere.
Yeah, and to you guys, Christophe, Patrick, thank you very much. It was a really interesting session. Unfortunately, Maria got cut off somewhere along the back roads of Scotland, and therefore hasn't been here for quite a while, but we have enjoyed the session. And on behalf of everybody who is here, the IRMS and IMTech, thank you for taking time to show this product to us. Thank you very much.
Cheers.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.